Hello and welcome to a video on how to put together your own intimacygram. Before we start on the actual diagramming, we're going to talk about some key concepts to help understand exactly what intimacy and balance are and how we can look at how that applies in our life. So the four main parts of the intimacygram are factors of intimacy, levels of intimacy, realms, and anchors. But to start with, we're going to start with the first two, factors of intimacy and levels of intimacy. Intimacy is a concept that is more complex than most people originally think of. When most people think of intimacy, they think of sex or love. But intimacy is actually a whole bunch of other factors combined to create each individual relationship that we have. Factors such as trust, respect, commitment, honesty, and a whole bunch of other factors that all come together and are integrated with the concept of communication. When I teach this in a classroom setting, I'll write usually 1 to 30 or 1 to 40 on a dry erase board, and everybody has to come up with at least 30 factors of intimacy, 30 things that make up intimacy. And most people kind of scratch their head in the beginning and don't really understand what I'm asking. A couple people might shout out some stuff like respect, honesty, trust, communication, and then all of a sudden the wheels start churning and the list starts growing. And everybody is usually amazed by the time we're done that we normally have around 35 to 40 factors of intimacy on the board. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to go into each individual factor, but just to look at the bigger picture that the factors are all very important and every relationship is built up of a different batch of factors. And I like to think of building blocks as different factors of relationships and intimacy. Every relationship we have is put together by a different combination of the factors of intimacy and different values in terms of the amount of how much of each one we have. Some relationships we have might have love as a common factor, but there might be more love in some relationships than others. So looking at the building block model, I like to think of some relationships like boxes of building blocks that don't have very many pieces. This is a relationship that might not have too many factors in it. So you have, it is what it is. You have a relationship based on few factors. You have other relationships that are a little bit deeper and are a little bit bigger boxes of building blocks until our primary relationships, which we don't have too many of, but the most important relationships we have, the deepest relationships are the relationships that are made up with the most factors of intimacy. So every relationship we have is a different box, a different combination. Sometimes we struggle in our relationships because there are factors at play that we don't understand. Sometimes we're brought up in households where we don't really understand what affection is. Or maybe we have a misguided view of what communication is. So we try to piece the world together with the best of our ability, but we keep coming up to roadblocks and our relationships suffer, and we don't know why. So this is why it's important to kind of look at the different factors of intimacy that are in place in each of our relationships to understand maybe what's missing and how we can improve upon that. The second concept are the levels of intimacy. So I have intimacy broken down into 5 different levels. And I kind of like to think of them as bookshelves. So we have 5 bookshelves and we have all these boxes of building blocks. Where do we place each one? So looking at a scale of 100 to 0, 100 being the most complete combination of all the factors of intimacy at really, really, really deep, deep levels. And 0 meaning basically a relationship void of any of them. Everything falls in a spectrum between these 2 points. The first level, the top level, is the true private level. This is where we put our spirituality. This is where we put our relationships that we hold so dear to our heart, but they're almost on a spiritual level. These are the relationships that we have with our higher power. These are the relationships we have with our infants. These are the relationships maybe we have with our pets, people who have passed. Whether or not our relationship was that good when these people were alive, but once they're gone, we hold them near and dear to our heart, and that becomes a spiritual relationship. Other relationships include our substance of choice, whether it be drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, gambling. Oftentimes when we're involved in these, they become our higher power. And God, Jesus, Muhammad, whoever our higher power is, kind of gets kicked to the curb at that point. So a lot of times when we're in transition, especially if we're in transition in recovery, we're trying to build a better spiritual core. And the things that we made part of our spiritual core, like drugs and alcohol, we're working on removing that from the type of relationship that we had with them. Our most perfect relationships, the relationships where somebody could finish your sentence, read your mind, is where we put true private. This is where some people would put their soulmate, if you're lucky enough to have a soulmate. I, however, believe that soulmates is a concept that Hollywood made, and we keep trying to find that perfect soulmate to be disappointed time and time again. So unless that you are sure you have your soulmate, there is one exception that I can think of for soulmates, and this would be identical twins. Most identical twins that I've met have had a relationship where it is spiritual and they can complete each other's sentences. So I would put that relationship up here as well. The next level is private. This would be 60 to 80% of all the factors of intimacy. And this is where we want to put our most primary relationships. This is where hopefully we'd want to put our spouses, maybe put our parents, definitely put our best friend forever. Going down a level, we have personal, which would be at 40 to 60%. This is where we put our good friends. These are maybe people that we've known for years, maybe siblings, cousins, people we grew up with that we've maintained a friendship with. But these are people that have a very solid relationship with us. Moving down to the next level, we have familiar. This is 20 to 40%. This is where we put our everyday friends. These are maybe where we put some neighbors that we're very close to, people that maybe we work with. And remember when I talk about these are not absolutes. Sometimes our spouses could be somebody who's very distant to us, and sometimes we're very close, extremely close with neighbors and people who are around us. So just remember, these are not absolutes. I'm just giving mere kind of everyday examples. So familiar is our fair weather, everyday friends. And then the last level, the bottom level, 0 to 20%, is distant. This is where we have our acquaintances. This is where we have the people that maybe we see every day, maybe we work with them, maybe we know them from AA meetings, we know their names, we know a little bit about them, but they're the Lego boxes that would be very small. There's just not a lot of depth there. This isn't to say that these people at one time weren't closer, or that in the future they couldn't be closer. But for right now, these are pretty much acquaintances. Now, if you were to look at your bookshelves after putting all your Legos where they are in hierarchy on there, you're going to find that the bottom level, the distant shelf, is full of boxes. As you go up in levels, each shelf is going to have fewer and fewer boxes until you get to the private level. Most people are lucky if they have anywhere between 3 and 5 relationships that are at that caliber. Why? It takes a lot of energy to build and maintain relationships like that. So it's natural that we may know 100 acquaintances or 200 acquaintances or 300 acquaintances. But the people that get closer to us get fewer and fewer until we get to the very top. So it's important to understand these factors and how we categorize each individual relationship, because this comes up again when we do our diagramming. So stay tuned for the third and fourth concept and how to put it all together.